So now I'm going to be showing you guys how to write a subscriber node. So this is just a node with a subscriber inside of it. The subscriber is basically how you're going to access data within a topic. So every time the publisher is going to modify that data, the subscriber is going to react to that modification and do something. So let's get ourselves all set up to work. Oops. Gotta open a terminal. See in your Catkin workspace source, and then within that it's going to be beginner tutorials. And then beginner tutorials has the scripts folder we created. Within that is the talker.py. We're going to be adding another Python file with this command here. I always do that. Paste it in. It's called listener.py. If we list everything inside of it again, we got a talker and then listener, and you'll see that talker is green, meaning it's executable, and then the listener is still white, meaning Linux isn't recognize it as an executable. To make it executable, we're going to do that same command, chmod. Oops. And then if we list again, ls, you see they're both green now. Alright, so remember you can do the code space dot, meaning open everything within the current directory into VS Code. So you'll see we got our talker that we just looked at, and now we got this new file called listener. Let's delete some stuff like that. I'm just going to leave this stuff here. You don't need to. It's just a kind of an explanation of what's going on within our code. So let's get right into it. Explain everything that's happening within this node. So remember, we always need this line that's telling Ross that we're going to be writing a node within Python. We get our import statements. This one's crucial. Import ROS.py. It's the package that contains all the Python stuff needed to write a ROS node. And then we got our string. We're just going to be using the string again. It's not a normal string like you would see where it's just the quotes and then something inside of it. This is a string that is designed for ROS. That's why we have to import it. So we got our entry point, our main method basically. And within that we're going to call listener. It's this function right here. We go inside of the listener function. Within that, we only have 3 lines of code, so it's pretty simple. First, we initialize our node. Let's call it listener, just to match the name of the Python file. Next, this one's crucial. Subscribe to the topic called chatter. Why is it chatter? It's because the publisher we created is publishing to chatter. So the subscriber is gonna look for a node called chatter and then expect it to have that that ROS string that we're importing. And then this part's the tricky part. So we have here what says callback, and you'll see that this callback is referencing this function right here. Depending on which languages you've programmed with before, this may or may not be a new concept to you. This is what's called passing a function as an argument. Normally we're going to see, or normally as programmers we would see variables passed as arguments. So we got, like, as an example, we're passing in a string here, or right here, string is referencing the data type we're using. And then here, what's really happening is it's a little bit of code. We're basically passing in a snippet of code that's going to be used later within the subscriber. So basically how the subscriber is designed to work is it's going to react to a change in a topic. So what you could get into, like, how are we going to define how it reacts? How are we going to define what it's supposed to do whenever the topic changes. And with that, we have to pass in callback. We're basically saying whenever Chatter is updated, we want you to call this function. So let's get into what callback does. So let's say the string within Chatter just got updated. So the subscriber, wherever the subscriber is executing, it's going to say, oh, all right, I got to call callback then. Our callback is set up to have one argument. This is how it's always going to be set up for the subscriber. You're going to see this a lot. This one argument is going to be whatever type, whatever data type the topic contains. In this case, it's the std messages string. You can look at it in the docs, the ROS docs. If you look up std_messages string, it should come up on Google and be one of the first results. Alright, so let's get into it. So rospy.log info, that's going to be the same as the we saw earlier. It's like your print or your console log, depending on which language you're familiar with. Within that, we're going to be printing to the console rospy.get caller ID. That's going to be the name of the local node, the current node. So I believe it would be listener then, or chatter rather, or no, listener. And then listener, and then concatenated with the plus operator, concatenated with I heard, and then a string. So data.data. This is laid out kind of confusing. You could also do it like this. This might be clearer. So you're just concatenating again. This way is good. It's gonna ensure that it's always expecting a string and it'll convert properly. So like, this is like, if you've done Java before, this is like your printf. So you have your string and then you have these what would you call it? Basically a target point. So then it knows this is referencing the argument that comes after it. So that should be clear. This is a little bit confusing. You might say, like, why can't we just say data and call it a day? So why is shouldn't this just be our string we want? So it should be fine to just concatenate it. Not really, because remember, this isn't a standard string for Python. This is a ROS specific one. So within the object, it's actually laid out in such a way that it has a parameter called data. Within data is a string that has what we want inside of it. So it's a little confusing, but it's not too bad. Like I said before, you can look at the ROS documentation for std messages, and it'll be a lot clearer what's going on there. So that's all there is to the callback. Remember, it's going to subscribe to Chatter. It should expect a string to be stored within Chatter. And then every time that string changes, you're going to call this function. Subscribers are set up in such a way that it's going to assume you have it set up for an argument when you write your callback function. We just called it data. You call it whatever you want. And then that argument, the subscriber is always going to pass in the current value within the topic. All right, so then spin here. Basically just going to hold my spot in the node. Make sure we don't leave listener, because if we leave listener, we might end up destroying the subscriber node we just created. So spin, you can read it here, give a clear definition. Until the ROS node is shut down, it's just going to stay there basically. See right here. Existing simply keeps Python from exiting until this node is stopped. So let's just run through everything one more time just to get a clear picture. So we got our comment right here that's telling ROS to expect it to be in Python. Import rospy. That's our package for ROS, for Python designed for ROS. Import our string object that we're going to use. Our entry point main method basically, in the same concept. Call listener. Within listener, we're going to initialize a node called listener just to match the Python name. Subscribe to a topic called chatter. The chatter topic contains a string. We know this because we just made another node with a subscriber inside of it, or a publisher inside of it rather. And then every time that topic is going to change, we need to act upon it with the little code snippet we're passing in this function, passing in a function as an argument. Within callback, we're going to log within the console the node name plus I heard, and then data. So basically what's happening here is, I believe it would say listener, I heard, and then the current time. The current time is whatever value is rospy.getTime within the other node. And then it would just call that callback every time within the subscriber. And then the spin is just to make sure this node stays live. Just work indefinitely until ROS is shut down. So this is actually pretty simple. The most complicated part is the callback. You have to think of it like, give me some code and I'll know to use it whenever the topic updates. And then how it's actually working is, all it's doing is just printing to the console whatever the current time is. It's just printing whatever value basically is inside of the topic that we're publishing to in the other node. So that's all there is to subscribers and publishers. You're going to be using this concept a lot within ROS. It's how we get our nodes to run at the same time and then act upon data that's happening somewhere else. So yeah, that's all there is to it. You can have as many subscribers or publishers you want within a node. So it's not like you have to just write how it's set up here. This would be talker or listener. It doesn't need to be that formal. You don't need to have a listener node where you could only subscribe or only publish, and you don't need a talker node where you can only subscribe and only publish. You could do it any way you wanted to. So it doesn't need to be so formal, like you have one that's only doing one job and one that's only doing the other. You might have a node that is going to subscribe to some data that's getting changed somewhere else, and then whenever that data is changed, it's going to modify it, act upon it some way, and then publish it somewhere else. You'll see that a lot. But that's all there is to it. So next up, you should be the next tutorial, you should be learning how to actually run this code and see it working. Yeah, thanks.